Hi everyone, this is Dikshit. Welcome to my channel. In this particular video, we will going to discuss about deploying a microservice application using Docker Compose. With that, on Docker Compose, usually I get a lot of questions like, is Docker Compose is an upgraded version of Docker or not? Is Docker Compose is very similar to Kubernetes or not? Do we use Docker Compose in production environment or not? So I'll also be answering all these questions at the end of the video. So now, prerequisite to watch this particular video is you need to know the basics of Docker, like writing a Docker file, commands to create an image and container, and basics of Docker Compose. And mandatory prerequisite is whatever the application that I'm going to deploy. I've already made a video where I've used a simple Docker instructions and I've deployed it on a Docker host where I've discussed about technical details about each microservice and the architecture of the microservice, as well as I've written the Docker file for each microservice and I've deployed. So I would strongly recommend you to watch that particular video before watching this. I'll going to provide the link in video's description. However, let me give you a brief about architecture and what all the microservices are there in the application. So application is a call booking application where it has two modules. One is user module, the other one is admin module. In the user module, there will be two microservices. One is developed by using React.js. The other one is developed by using Node.js. So React.js is a UI where user can access it through the browser, where it will going to provide the options to enter the details. Once user provides the details, then the data will be sent to this Node.js microservice, where the data will be validated. And then if everything is fine, so then the data will be inserted into MongoDB. So let me show you the user UI web page. So this is the user UI web page where user can fill out details like name, email address, phone number, payment information, and then click on submit. So once user clicks on the submit, so then user will get confirmation mail saying like this, your booking has been confirmed. Somebody from the team will contact you soon, as well as it'll gonna send the mail to admin user as well. So, and on the other end, we have admin module. So in the admin module, again, two microservices are there. So admin UI is being developed by using React.js, and then admin API is being developed by a Node.js. And here also, user will have a UI where he will get the data from MongoDB, and then admin can execute few of the activities like schedule a call or like categorizing the call as a spam. So multiple activities admin can do it. And the data will be exchanged between MongoDB by Node.js itself. But the UI will be there in the React. So that will send the data to this Node.js microservice. And then it will interact with the MongoDB and do certain operations like update, delete, and get. So whatever it is. So let me show you that as well. So this is the admin UI where admin can log in. So right now I've already logged in. So if you admin user is not logged in, so it'll gonna ask username password. So let me provide the username password. When admin user provides username password, he will be authenticated, and then you'll have different tabs like book call, schedule, done, spam. So admin can check the details of the call booking, and if admin thinks that this is proper information and payment is received, so then user can click on schedule and then can schedule the call with whoever has booked the call. If admin thinks that this is a spam call, so then admin can click on spam, it goes to spam directly. So this is about the application. Before deploying the application by using Docker Compose, let's understand what is Docker Compose and why do we need Docker Compose. So generally, if you want to deploy any application or a microservice in Docker, so then you need to follow certain procedure. First is you need to create a Docker file. And once the Docker file is created, so then you can create a Docker image by using Docker build command. And by using Docker run command, you can create the container out of whatever the image that you have created. And that's where inside the container, your application or a microservice will be up and running. Let's assume to develop call booking application, there are a bunch of developers and they've created Docker file for each microservice, and Docker file is there in root folder of each microservice. And also if they do any changes, let's say they will gonna follow some developer workflow. Usually, generally also in projects, this is the common workflow that they'll do. Whenever they do a change, So they'll have some kind of a Docker host, which will be hosted in a cloud, or like that virtual machines will be hosted in local as well. So once the change is done, so they will gonna create a image and they will gonna launch that particular container. They're gonna verify that particular change, whether it is working fine or not in that local Docker host, or like in any test Docker host. And then only they will gonna send the changes to the review. So let's assume developer one was did the setup in one of the virtual machine where Docker is installed, and he brought up the whole call booking application. So once this setup is done, so you got one requirement to do the changes in user UI, admin UI, and admin API. Now, so developer one has done the changes in all these three microservices. And now to test that particular one, so has created a new images for all these three microservices. And before deploying the new container, so as the previously the setup is running, right? The for all application, you need to stop and remove the previous container, which were running for like user UI, admin UI, and admin API. So he kills that and he creates a new container. So once he deploys, he sees that there is one small bug or a small issue. Then again, he does some changes to user UI and let's assume admin API. So then again, he has to repeat the same procedure, create a new image because there is a code change, and then delete the old container, bring up the new container. Here you can see that. So whenever there is a change in each microservice, when we say development team, so obviously they'll get a lot of requirement and they'll be working on multiple changes. If they want to do the same procedure to deploy or to test it, if they want to follow the same procedure, creating a new image, creating a new container, destroying an old container, it will be really a problematic thing. Because sometimes due to so many tasks, developer can miss some configuration, or while executing a command, they can do some kind of wrong configuration, and so their testing won't happen properly. Again, they need to check, they need to bring it up. So all these kind of issues will be there, and this can impact developer productivity as well. And as well as if it is one time, that's fine. So they'll be getting so many tasks to do the changes, and they'll gonna do all this creation of image, creation of container on a daily basis. This is really a problematic thing. To solve this particular problems, is there any a solution where I can execute a single command where it can do create new images and bring down new containers? So that's where Docker Compose will come into picture. So in Docker Compose, we can write a YML file, a Docker Compose YML file. And by using a single command, only single command, we can create a new images and create a new containers where developers can easily deploy their microservices to test their application. So now, so let's see what is Docker Compose. This is the definition that I've copied from Docker documentation. You can see that Docker Compose is a tool for defining and running multi-container application very easily. And as well as it is a key to unlocking streamlined and efficient development and deployment experience. So now if we use Docker Compose, developer don't need to execute these many commands. So by using a single Docker Compose up-d command, so the entire application can be redeployed in a matter of few minutes. So let's see that. And in Docker Compose, we need to write a Docker Compose YML. As extension says, it's a YML file where we need to define where our Docker file is there, what is the images that we need to use, ports, and also is there any environment variables that are there. All those things we need to define it. And Docker Compose, by default, it won't be there in Docker. So we need to install it separately. So by using these commands, we can install it, Docker Compose on a Ubuntu machine. If you want to install it on a CentOS and any other different OS, then you need to search for a command and you can install the Docker Compose. So now let's write a Docker Compose for call booking application. And with a single command, let's deploy call booking application. Now let's start writing a Docker Compose file for call booking application. And you can see that this is a repo where I have the code for all the microservices and Docker files as well. I'm going to provide this particular repo link in video's description. You can clone or fork it so that you can practice in your local machines as well. So in this repository, I've already cloned onto the EC2 machine. This is where I've already installed Docker Compose. So now let's start writing the Docker Compose file. So the file name should be docker-compose.yml. The first line, first instruction that we need to specify here is version, Docker Compose file syntax version. So I'm going to use 2. And then once this is done, so we need to specify. So rather than writing it in VI, so let me use my Visual Studio Code and let's write the Docker Compose there, and we will going to copy it back to this particular EC2 host, and then we will going to deploy the application. So I've already opened my Visual Studio Code and cloned the repository as well. So let me create a new file, which is docker-compose.yml. And you can see that as soon as I create, so some message has been shown here. This is because I've already installed few of the plugins which are related to Docker Compose, which can help me in auto suggestion and writing code a little better. So you can also go out and you can install it. You can see that I've installed Docker Linter. Maybe this we need to install it, but one are the other extensions that I've installed already. So that's why this message. The first statement, as I said, it should be version, Docker Compose syntax version, which is 2. In my case, I'm using. So once that is done, we need to specify a keyword which is called as services. So under this, we need to define the container details. What is the images that we were going to use? How many services that we are bringing in? All those kind of information. So let me show you again the architecture of the application. Here you can see that 4 microservices, 1 database. So before bringing up this API microservices, we need to bring up this database, or else API services will gonna fail. So first container that I want to bring is MongoDB. I need to give a block name or a container block name. So that's where I will give Mongo-DB as block name. And then under this, I need to specify the container details. Whether I need to use image or do I need to use a Docker file, that information I need to specify it. So here I'm going to use already existing image, which is official image, which is there in the hub.docker.com. I'm going to use that only. And in the repository, I have one file which is called as command.md. This is where I've listed all the commands to bring up the call booking application. So let's use this command so that we can write Docker Compose very easily. So here you can see that I'm using this image. Let me copy this image and put it here. And then the next thing is, now we have specified the image name, but we need to specify on what port this particular Mongo container should run on. So to specify the ports, we need to use tag or keyword ports. And under that, we can specify the ports. So in my case, MongoDB runs on 27017. So this port, publish ports. So let me copy this. So in this port, this left side port will be always machine port, and this side port will be the container port. So once this is done, so let me check again the command. Is there anything? So we need to specify all these environment variables. So without these environment variables, I won't be able to bring up my MongoDB. We can bring it up, but it will be by default username and default password. I don't want to do that. So I want to specify root username and root password. So let me specify that as well. So to specify the environment variables, we need to use a tag environment. So under that environment, we need to specify all the environment variables. And it should be a list. So I need to specify it like this: Mongo initdb root username. And after that, like this is one environment variable. And then Mongo init root password. So then I need to specify this as well. So the way you specify environment variable in Docker Compose is by specifying the environment tag. Under that, this is a key variable name and this is a value. Now my MongoDB is done. So by using this configuration, I can bring up my MongoDB container by publishing these ports and these environment variables. Now we need to bring API microservices. So let's first bring up user API. I'm going to name this block as user API. And here, so previously for bringing up MongoDB, I've used image, but here I don't have any image, right? So that's where I can use build tag and I can specify the location of the Docker file. So if I use build and when I specify the location of Docker file, what it does is it will gonna create the image out of the Docker file by Docker Compose itself. Now my Docker Compose in root folder of call booking, but Docker file of user API is in this particular folder. I need to specify / user API folder so that it goes to this particular folder and search for Docker file. So this is where my Docker file exists. So that's where I'm giving that particular path. And once this is done, so now this will take care of creating an image and creating a container as well. But I need to publish some ports, right? So let's see on what ports this particular user API runs on. So here you can see that it runs on 1004. Machine and container port also I'm giving the same. So let's give the ports. And next, let's check what else we have. We have environment variables again. So let me copy this. Let me specify environments. And under that, Mongo URL. I need to specify the Mongo URL. We need to construct that URL. And once that is done, so we need to also specify admin email. In my case, I'm using this as admin email. So that's why I don't need to change anything. But here we need to change it. The first thing is we need to, we call it as a connection string. This helps this microservice to connect with MongoDB. If this is not correct, then my user API microservice won't be able to connect with MongoDB. So first, let's specify the user. So here, in place of user, I'm going to specify Mongo admin user, and the password is this. And also machine IP, where I'm going to deploy this particular whole application, right? Where MongoDB will be deployed, that machine IP is required. So in my case, all these microservices I'll be deploying in the same machine, right? So I need to take that particular machine IP and provide it here. So let me go to EC2 console and let me take, this is the machine IP. So let me provide that. And then the port. So I'm running MongoDB on this port. So let me provide that. And in Docker Compose, I've seen that like this double quote shouldn't be there for environment variables. So let's remove that particular one. If you specify that, so I've seen in my previous task, like at times it won't work. So that's why I've removed it. So now this is the information that we need to provide to bring up user API. And then likewise, we'll also let's bring it up admin API. So this is a right procedure always when you are deploying application. First, bring up API and backend services, and then only go for the UI applications. So it shouldn't be like first you bring up UI and then API. Always better to deploy backend and API and then come back to UI. So now let me specify this as admin API. So I've just copy pasted the above block. So rather than typing it again, so and then the build folder should be, in my case, admin API. And then let's see the ports. I'll go to the repo documentation. You can see this is the command to bring up admin API. Here, the admin API also runs inside the container on same port. So, but machine port, I'm giving this because I can't reuse 1004, which will be already used by user API. So that's why I'm just taking this particular ports. Here you can see that on machine port 1005, this admin API will be running. And then 1004 is what like inside the container admin API microservice will be running. And let's see what environment variable it requires. Only one env variable which is required, which is connection string Mongo URL. Admin email is not required. Even if you provide, it doesn't create any problem. And here one more thing, say I don't want to bring up user API before my MongoDB is up and running. So that's where in Docker Compose, we have a tag, which is depends on where we can specify on what container this particular user API is depending on. Until unless like MongoDB is up and running, I don't want to bring up this. So that's where I can use this depends on. When I use this depends on, until this MongoDB is up and running, it won't create or start a user API container. So now depends on, and we need to give this particular block name. So let me give it as MongoDB. And for this API also, it's the same, depends on, and then let me provide MongoDB as dependency. Now, once this is done, so the next microservice that I want to bring is user UI. And then for this also, we will use Dockerfile rather than already pre-built image. We're going to use the build and let's specify the Dockerfile location. In my case, is there an user UI. So, and then once that is done, so ports, let's see what should be the ports. For this user UI, you can see that this is the command to bring up user UI. The ports are 3000:3000. So whatever is on the left side is the machine port and the right side is the container port. On this port, the application will be running inside the container. And let's check, does it require any environment variables? It doesn't require anything. And then now let's also provide depends on, because I don't want to bring my UI if API is not up and running. So that's where I will specify it as depends on, let's give tab. Here also, always go with one. Environmental spacing plays a very, very important role. So always use tab. So in my case, I'm using tab as well. So here I'm going to specify it as user API. So until unless user API is up and running, I don't want to bring up this. And then the next one is admin UI. And again, it is one and the same. So let me copy this. Build folder will be admin UI. So under admin UI only, my Docker file is there. So that's fine. And then once that is done, the ports. Here, even as this is a Node.js application, it will gonna run on same port. I guess I have made a mistake in documentation. It should be some other port. It shouldn't be 3000 port, because 3000 port, machine port, has been already used by user UI. Let me change it to 3001. And then this depends on admin API. So this is a Docker Compose file that I need to write to bring up all my call booking application. So now let's copy this particular one onto the EC2 machine and let's deploy it. We're going to copy. Let's go to EC2 machine. Let's empty whatever is there already. So let me connect back. I guess the session has been expired. I'm going to copy this Docker Compose and let's empty if anything is already there in Docker Compose YAML. Let's empty it. And then let me create Docker Compose YAML. And then let's insert this particular one. So let's save this particular one. And then now what I will do is, so now, so before, if I want to bring the call booking application on Docker host, so these are the commands that I wanted to execute. First, creation of Docker image of each microservice. And then I need to provide all the environment variables for a command, and then I need to bring it up. But now, as I've defined everything in Docker Compose, I need to execute Docker hyphen compose up hyphen D. So when I execute, you can see that images is being pulled, and it will gonna create the image, create the container. Everything will be done by Docker Compose itself. Let's wait for it. It will gonna take a bit of a time. You can see that MongoDB has been pulled and it has created a container. And now it is creating image for user API because that is the second container details that we have specified. With that details, it will be created. And it will gonna go series like that itself, admin API and user UI and admin API. Until this generates the image, creates the container, I'll be pausing the video. Now the command has been executed successfully. It has created images, containers, respectively, however we have mentioned in Docker Compose. And you can see that Docker Compose offers a lot of other options as well. Build up. We can use Docker Compose down as well to bring down all microservices. But before that, so let's check all our containers are running or not. I see that Docker PS and I can see only three microservices which are up and running. So let me do Docker PS-A, and you can see that it says that exited, like API, user API, admin API, both are in exited state. So let's see the logs, Docker logs, and then let me copy the container ID and let's check. Here I can see that we made one mistake. So while constructing the connection string of a MongoDB, you can see that we need to provide @ before the host IP address. So let's do the change. So let me verify it. So by just looking at the documentation, you can see that this @ we have missed. So let me provide that @ and here as well. So in this particular one also, I need to do it. So I would have done directly in this particular machine because as I've just copied it. So let's do the changes in this connection string. So let me save, and again, I can clear the screen. So let me execute the same command again. So it identifies if already the container is up to date, then it won't create it. So is whatever the changes which are there in admin API, user API, only it will consider that and then it will be deployed. So let's check now. You can see that all the microservices are up and running. So we can check the logs of API microservice first. Maybe I'm gonna check the admin API logs. It's working fine. You can see that it has been connected to MongoDB. So I see that all the microservices are up and running. So my application should also be working fine. So let's access this particular microservice over a browser. My user UI runs on 3000. So let's give 3000. You can see that user UI is up and running. So likewise, let's open admin UI as well, so, which runs on 3001. You can see that admin UI is also up and running. Now let's book some call. So I'm gonna give maybe spam as name, and the mail ID I'll give it as this itself. Phone number, some random phone number I'll give, and then the service type DevOps consulting. I'm gonna choose the file where I'll give some random image, and it will gonna open the preview, and let's click on proceed, submit. So once we do that, it should book a call where it should send the email to the user as well as it should send the email to administrator as well. So let's check that. So let me refresh. This is the admin email. And meanwhile, even user, you can see that got the email. So with the name, whatever user has provided there. And admin should have also got the email. Sometimes it can be a bit late because I'm using this GoDaddy's email. You can see that you have a new booking. So this is for admin. So now let's log into admin whether this particular booking is there or not. Let's check. So to log into this particular admin, first I need to have a username password. So in admin API, there is one endpoint. So we need to create an admin user by using that particular endpoint. To do that, I will going to use Postman. So by using Postman, I can hit that particular API and then I can create the admin user. So I need to provide the details of my admin API. So this is correct. And under that, like I have an endpoint, which is API admin register. So using which we can create a admin user. So in my case, the username will be Dikshit, password will be admin123. If you want, we can change it. So let's keep it as maybe admin and then password as DevOps123. So let's click on send. So once I do that, you can see that admin user has been created. So let's try to log in admin, and the password will be DevOps@123. So when I click on that, you can see that whatever call bookings that has happened will show up here. Scheduled, we don't have anything. So if admin clicks on schedule, so then it comes to schedule. So here, once the call is done, everything is done. So admin can click on done. So it goes to done state. And we have this button as well. So when we click on export data, so all the call details will be exported to Excel and will be downloaded onto the machine where we have logged in. We can do log out and log in again. So now we can see that if there are any changes also in the application code, the command that we need to execute is this one. It's quite simple. Rather than executing Docker build command, multiple Docker run instructions, by using a single command, single configuration file, we can bring a lot of containers. And that's where whenever there is a multi-container application that you want to deploy, so Docker Compose is the best choice, as well as which has advantages because developer don't need to execute multiple commands to bring up the application, and we can avoid a lot of confusion. If multiple commands, then the confusion will be more. If less commands, the confusion is less. By using single command, we can bring up whole application. So that's the advantage of Docker Compose. Now let's go back to the PowerPoint. And so when I started the video, I discussed about these particular questions, right? So I usually get these questions. So let's now try to understand, or like, let me answer these questions. Is Docker Compose is upgraded version of Docker? So now you should definitely have answer for this. So I would say it's not a upgraded version of a Docker. Docker Compose is a tool by using which we can deploy or develop multi-container applications easily. I wouldn't say it's an upgraded version. It's just a tool by using which we can maintain or like properly maintain our deployments of Docker containers. And the next question is Docker Compose is similar to Kubernetes? No, absolutely no. Kubernetes offers a lot many other things. It offers like self-healing and configurations management properly, and also we can store persistent data properly. In Docker Compose, all those things are not provided. Docker Compose is only for maintaining multi-container application. It makes developers' life little easier, whoever deploys or who want to deploy that particular application. So the next question is, do we use Docker Compose in prod environments? I would say partially yes and no, because for stateless applications, I would suggest Kubernetes is better. But for stateful applications, like for example, if you want to bring up GitLab or any kind of like Artifactory, so Docker Compose suits better because you will bring only one replica. You won't bring multiple replicas. So that's where Docker Compose can help you if you want to bring up any supporting containers as well. So I've seen also in some of the projects to bring up stateful applications, they'll go with combination of Docker and a VM. So that's where they will use Docker Compose as well to make their deployment a bit easier. So that's it for this video. If you've liked the video, please do like, share, and subscribe, and have a great day.